So this next video is going to take us through the non-void methods section of the note. All right, so we're going to jump right in here. And the first method we're going to write, guys, is illustrated well with this picture that I've got on top of the note. Okay, so think of a method in terms of being like a box with code inside of it, okay? But we already have like some things we can send in. So in the first video we learned how to supply data, like a name that we can say hello to. All right, but you can put as many of these parameters in at the one side of your method as you want to. So this particular example, we're going to be sending in two things this time. We're going to be sending in two double values, a width and a height. So these are my inputs into the method. Okay, but we can also have an output, so a return that sends back the area. So we're going to receive these two pieces of information, we're going to multiply them together, and then we're going to return or send back the answer. So we're going to write the code for this, and then we're going to show you how to properly call this from the main method. All right, and we're just going to continue with the same example we have here. I will get rid of these greeting calls for now. Maybe I'll just leave one there as an example, and we'll just kind of green it out or gray it out for now because we know how to do that. All right, so let's go maybe outside the main method, and we'll just push greeting down a bit, give ourselves some room. All right, so this next method, like all the others, start with the words public static. All right, but now the third word is going to change. So instead of void, we're going to put double in here. All right, and more about that in just a second. I'm going to call my method getArea, and I'm going to have two inputs or two parameters, which I'm going to call double x and double y. Okay, and you can call these whatever you want to, x, y, num1, num2, width, height, whatever you want to call them. Okay, these are just temporary variables that are used as receivers of information when a method gets called, if that makes sense. All right, so now inside of here I'm going to declare another variable. Okay, so I'm going to call it area, and I'm going to make it a double as well. So double area equals x times y, right? So there's nothing earth-shattering in this code. All right, so we're almost done, but if I stop here for a second, notice we have an error. Okay, and if I mouse over this, it might even tell me what that error is. Missing return statement. All right, so that's good. So what we have to do now is send back area as my answer. Okay, so right below this, I'm going to say this, return area. All right, so that's a new line of code as well. Okay, so what return does is basically send back this answer. All right, now this is where we get into talking about void, okay, versus double. Okay, so one of the things that a method can do is send back an answer. Now we haven't really seen much of that yet. Although this is the first time we're actually making a method like this ourselves. So the kind of answer that getArea sends back is a double. So area is a double, and we're returning a double, so that matches up just fine. Okay, if I said something like return the word hi, okay, that's not going to work because now I've got an error again, because hi isn't a double, it's a string. Now if I change the return type up here to string, then I'm okay again, because I'm saying I'm sending back a string, and sure enough, I'm returning a string. Now that's obviously what we don't want in this example, but I just wanted to show you that you can return anything you want, but whatever you return down here has to match up with the third word up here. Okay, so this is the return type. Okay, which brings me to void. Okay, so we've seen void a lot. So void means we're not returning anything. Okay, so if you use the word void, you don't need a return statement because void means nothing. So we're not returning anything, so the method can be void. But very often we have return types that are not void, as in up here. So I'm going to put this back to being double, and I'm going to return area, just like that. All right. So now we have that. Now this is going to impact again how we call this method. All right. So let me start first by taking a screenshot of this. And I want to make sure that we get that into our note. All right, so going back to my code here, I'm just going to take a picture of the getArea method. All right, so there goes my camera, and I'm just going to put it into my note like so. All right, I guess I can give myself a little bit more room down here. All right, so how would you call this method from the main method? All right, so let's go back into that code here for a second, and we'll take a look at that. All right, so in the first example, we said greeting Bob. All right, so in this one, I can say getArea, right, and it understands getArea. Okay, but I can't go like that because right off the bat, we know that getArea is requiring two inputs, okay, an x and a y. So I can send in two numbers, like say 12 and 20. Okay, now because these are doubles, I can leave them like that, or I could say like 12.5 and 20.2 if I want to. Okay, and so that seems to work, and I'm not getting any errors. Okay, but I'm going to tell you that this isn't exactly the right way to call this, because if you notice, guys, I'm not printing anything anywhere. So I can call it like this, but I'm not going to see this area result anywhere. It's not like I'm returning it, but I'm not returning it to anything in particular, so I'm not going to actually see the answer. So if I compile this and run it right now, I'm literally just going to see a blank console. All right, so I'll just show you that really quickly just to show you what I'm talking about. All right, so we don't get any errors. Console pops up, but we're not actually seeing anything. Okay, and that's because we didn't do anything with the answer we got back. All right, so let me come back in here again. So when I return area, okay, I need a variable to receive back the answer. All right, so I'm going to have like, double result, I guess, equals get area. Okay, so now, let me spell that right. Now I've got an answer that I've gotten back from the get area method. Okay, so now down here I can go something like this: c.println, and I can say like the area is right plus area. Okay, or sorry, plus result rather. Okay, so now I'm actually going to see something happening. Okay, so I'm getting the area back and receiving it by result, and then I'm printing the result. Okay, so now whatever this is multiplied together is what I'm going to see as my answer. So let me just compile that and run that again, and you can see what that looks like. Okay, so the area is 252.5. All right, so another way we could have called this correctly is to just run get area right inside the print statement. Okay, so if I don't need result other than to capture the answer, only just to print it again, I can actually skip that step. Okay, so I can go on this line, the area is, and this time I'm just going to make a call right in the print statement to get area. Okay, and I'll send in two different numbers this time just to show you that I can send in any two numbers I want to. All right, so this is going to be the area is, and in this case it'll be 120. All right, so if I compile this again and I run it, you'll see the result of that. The area is 120. So that's also a correct way to call this. Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to say about all of this here, guys, is when you are running a method that returns something, you got to do something with the answer you get back. Either store it in a variable, which you can then later print, or you can like send it into a print statement directly so you can see the result right away if you want to. Okay, but there's got to be a way to deal with the answer. All right, so I believe that's the next question here, is how would you call this method from the main method? All right, so I've shown you two different ways to do that. I'm going to show you one more way as well. Let me just go back in here and we'll take a look at that. So you wouldn't normally necessarily send in actual numbers like this, okay? So I can have, like up here, I can have like double width equals, I don't know, 16 and height equals 30, okay? So what I can do instead then, and I'll just do like another one of these get area print statements where I just print it right to a print line, or I call it right to a print line. And rather than sending in the actual numbers 10, 12, I'm going to send in the variables width and height. Okay, and that's also going to work. So whatever 16 times 30 is what I'm going to see down here. All right, so if I compile that and I run it one more time, you'll see how that works. So I'll just run this quickly here. Okay, so 480 is the area for that one. All right, so hopefully you guys see what's happening here, because it can be kind of confusing. This is one of those topics that I find the first time I teach it, especially like remotely like this during COVID, this could be something that's a little bit hard to understand. Let me first take a screenshot of this, and just this part here. So you've got different examples of how to do that. All right, now I think that's a new screenshot that is probably beside the other one. It just puts them randomly on my desktop here. I believe that's the one there. Yeah, that's it there. Okay, this is why I should be cleaning up my desktop after every screenshot so that I don't see them all over the place. All right, so that's that. Now, before we go on to the next question, guys, and answer some of these other ones, I just want to come back and revisit that example one more time because this is the first time we're seeing something like this with non-void methods. It deserves a little bit more of an explanation. So bear with me here while we do that. All right, so let me just take a shot of all of this for a second here. And I'm going to bring this into my favorite paint program for a second so that I can explain this a little bit better to you. So I'll go to Paintbrush. That's the one I've got here on my Mac. That way I can draw lines on it. All right, so here's a picture of my code. Okay, so let's talk about this last call where we did get area, width, and height. Okay, so I've got these two variables called width and height. Okay, and they're both equal to numbers 16 and 30. Right, so far so good. Now, what happens when I call get area is I'm sending width and height into the get area method. All right, x and y are receivers. Okay, so width, and because width is 16, width is passing its number to x. Okay, so what's x getting? X is getting the number 16. So I'll just put that here. Okay, but these are different variables. Okay, so think of it as like tossing a football. I always like to use that as my my analogy. Okay, so width is throwing 16 over and x is receiving it. Same with height. Okay, so height has the number 30 stored in it, and it's being sent over, or tossed, I guess, into the method, and it's being received by y. Okay, so width and height carry the same values as x and y. Okay, they're sharing them. Okay, now it doesn't change the values of width and height themselves can't get into area. What they can do though is they can send their numbers in. Okay, so x and y are the receivers, and they receive 16 and 30 in this case. And before that it was 10 and 12. Before that it was 12 and a half and 20.2. Okay, but each time x and y are receiving this data from the outside, whether it's actual numbers or variables that hold data in them, either is okay. All right, so then on the return side, we're returning area. Okay, so where does area get returned to? Well, in the first example we did, we actually had a variable for that, didn't we? Okay, so in the first example, area gets returned to result. Okay, so whatever area is, it's like another football pass, and it's sending its number back to result, and then we print result here. Okay, in the other two examples though, we're just literally sending area back as a number to the print statement. Okay, so whatever answer gets sent back as a number gets tacked on to the end of the area is. Okay, so either way, we're correctly calling this because we're doing something with the answer we get back. Okay, but in both examples, area is the thing that gets sent back. All right, so this one example here, guys, or this illustration, basically sums up most of what I'm trying to teach you. So really try your best to understand this. Okay, we send stuff in, we get something back out. Okay, and that's going back to the example that I gave here at the very top. Okay, so we're sending in a width and a height, which I called x and y. We get the area and we return back the area. All right, so hopefully that makes some sense. Let's continue with a few other answers here. What does the word void mean when you create your own method? Well, I mentioned that earlier, but in case you don't remember, let's just write that down. So void means there is no return statement. Okay, put another way, there is no answer being sent back. Right, that's a good way to think of it. So if you have a void method, you don't need the return. Okay, it also means that you don't need to like receive an answer. So again, look at the way we call greeting, right? Because greeting is a void method, we don't need to set it equal to something like we do with getArea. We don't need to print greeting because greeting does its own printing on its own. All right, so it also impacts how you call the method. Okay, so when you replace void with int or string or boolean, what does your method need to do? All right, and we saw the example where I changed area to a string for just a second. Okay, so it needs to return an answer that is the same type as whatever is declared at the top of the method. Right, so depending on what kind of method it is, the return type has to match that. Okay, so getting to the top of the method, this is another good question here that I want to cover, another terminology type question. So what is another name for the first line of the method? What three things are defined here? Okay, so the first line of the method actually has a name. It's called the method signature. Okay, and it defines the following three things. Okay, and in the order that they come in. The following three things in this order. Okay, so the first thing is the return type. Okay, now this could be void if it doesn't return anything, but it could also be double, or it could be string, or it could be Boolean, it could be any one of those things. Okay, the second thing is the method name. Okay, get area, greeting, say hello, new game, okay, whatever we want to call it. Okay, and the third thing is required parameters. Parameters, if any. Okay, so if we go back to our very first example here with the say hello, okay, so see these brackets here beside it? That's where your required parameters go, if you have any. Now you don't have to have any, okay? We've worked with a lot of methods. In fact, all the methods up until now haven't had any, but that's the space where you put them if there is any required parameters. Okay, so starting with the very second example, we now have one parameter called name. Then we go to the next example and we have two parameters called double x and double y. Okay, so these are the three things: the return type, which is double in this case, get area, which is the method name, and then the third thing is the required parameters. Okay, so that makes up the method signature. All right, so let's do a couple of other examples here. So write a method that receives 4 midterm marks and returns the average. Okay, so we're going to have 4 things coming in and 1 thing going back out. All right, so let's go back into our one learning example here, and we'll add that as our next thing. All right, so I'm going to disable all these print statements here, and I can do that the following way, guys. If I go /*, okay, that disables a bunch of code until I come down and go */. All right, and then it grays out the entire area. So I don't want to see those lines of code anymore. I don't want to delete them. I want them there as part of my note, but I just want to not see them for now. All right, so let's move get area down, and we'll do another method that receives 4 marks, returns the average. Okay, let's make it an int average so that we get back a whole number. So I'm going to go public static. So we always start with those 2 words. This time around, I'm going to make the return type int. So it's going to send back an integer. Then comes the name of the method, which I'm going to call get average. Okay, and I'm going to send in 4 integers. I'm going to call them int m1 for mark 1, int m2, int m3, and int m4. Notice, guys, that even though they're all ints, I can't do what I would do if I was declaring these as regular variables up at the top there. So I can't go like this. I can't go int m1, comma, m2, m3, m4. Okay, now if we were doing this up in the main method, I could do that. But these are called what we call formal parameters. Okay, that's the actual full name of them. Formal means that each one of them has to be formally declared as a type. All right, so I have to put the word int in front of each of these, even though you know, we know they're all ints, but the method needs to know that too. So we're going to put these all in. All right, so from here, I'm going to declare a local variable, like a variable that's just used inside of here and gets returned as the answer. So I'm going to call it answer, I guess. I can call it average, whatever I want to call it, equals the 4 marks added up divided by 4. All right, so I'm going to go m1 plus m2 plus m3 plus m4. Okay, and then I'm not done yet. I'm still going to get an error if I just let it sit like this, because I still have to return an int. So the int I want to return, of course, is answer. So I'm going to say return answer. Okay, and then I am good. All right, so to call this, we need 4 ints that can either be numbers or they can just be variables. Okay, so we'll do it both ways. Okay, so I'm going to do it the quick and easy way. C.println my average is plus a call to get average, sending in the numbers 75, 82, 91, and 84. Those are not too bad. Hopefully you get marks like that. All right, so that's one way you can do it, but you probably wouldn't do it that way. And I'm missing another bracket here, I think. There we go. A more formal way of doing it is to receive, like using c.print and c.readInt, asking the person for their marks and then putting them in. Now, to keep this part of the video short, I'm not going to do all of that, but instead I'm going to declare 4 int variables. Okay, so I'm going to have int math equals 67, eng, which is for English, 74, comp, which is for computers, is 88, and I don't know, science, which is a mark of 62. Didn't do so good in science. All right, so then I'm going to have like int my avg equals get average, and I'm going to send in those marks: math, English, computers, and science. Okay, so this is a more formal way of doing it, but that's probably more like the way you would see it actually used. All right, so again, math gets sent in, received by M1, English gets received by M2, computers, M3, science, M4, and then the answer gets returned back to my average. All right, now if I want to see my average, then I would again go c.println my average is, and because I went ahead and called this ahead of time into a variable, I can just print the variable here now instead. All right, so that's another way of doing it. All right, so let's just run these two and we'll see what we get. Okay, so my average is 83, my average is 72. Okay, and we can safely assume that those are the right answers for those. All right, so that's the first one done. Write a method receives 4 midterm marks, returns the average. All right, so let's copy that into here. Okay, and maybe what I'll do too, guys, is I'm going to copy the part of the main method that shows us calling the method too, because I like the way we do it with actual numbers and then using variables and calling it, receiving the answer in one line and then printing the answer in the second line. Excuse me, dry throat. All right, so let's just copy all of that. All right, now I got to go hunting for my screenshot here. I believe this is it up here. So now, because I've minimized my node, I got to bring that back up. There we go. And we'll just bring this into here. All right, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. All right, so that's that one. Write a method that receives a mark and sends back true if it's a pass or false if it's a fail. So we're sending back true or false. This is a Boolean method, okay? And these are very common as well. So I'm going back into my code here, and again, I'll just push this down, and I'll just put this method on top. So this is going to be public static Boolean. I'm going to call it is passing. Okay, so I'm going to get back a true if I'm passing and a false if I'm not. So I need to send in like an AVG, or an average, okay, and I'm just going to go like this. I'm going to say if AVG is greater than or equal to 50, I'm going to return true, else I'm going to return false. All right, so in this method we're sending back a true or a false depending on what average is that's coming in. Okay, so now here, how do I call that? Well, I can set up a Boolean variable, x equals is passing, and I can send in my average. Okay, so that's going to work. Okay, and depending on what the value of my average is, which is being received by this variable average, so these are two different variables, guys. This is the argument being sent in, this is the parameter. They share the same number, okay, but it's being passed in like a football. All right, so I'm going to get back a true or false, which will be stored into x. But typically, you don't call Boolean methods this way. We know the ultimate goal of a Boolean is to be inside of an if statement. So typically, here's an example where we typically do call the method right within the if statement. Okay, so here's what we say instead. We say if bracket is passing my AVG, then on the next line I'm going to go c.println you passed, else I'm going to say c.println you failed. Okay, so that's how you would do it. All right, so is passing my AVG gets called right in here, and coming back will be either the word true or the word false. So if true, it'll do the first thing, else it'll do the second thing. All right, so I'm probably going to say you pass based on my marks up here. So let's just compile this and run it, and we'll just verify that that's what we get. So I'm just going to see the answer you passed because of the calling of that method. And then we'll force it to be a fail. So you passed, okay, because I got back a true. Okay. In fact, just to show you that that is the case, maybe I'll print the result of it first. So I'm going to go c.println am I passing? Question mark. right? Plus a call to is passing. And I'm going to send in my AVG. Okay, so before I say whether I've passed or not, this is just sort of a roundabout way of showing you the calling of the method, and you can literally see what comes back as a true or a false. And then I'm using it in here again to say whether I've passed or not. Now, this is why, guys, this is the better way to call methods, by the way. So rather than calling it right in a print statement, if I need the result in something else, then I want to store it into a variable first, which is the case here, because I want to store getAverage into my AVG so that I can later send my AVG into a method. Now I just realized here I need to be calling is passing my AVG. There we go. So now I'm going to get back a true or false. All right, so let's force ourselves to fail. I would never normally encourage this, guys, but just for the purpose of demonstration, we're going to put these all below 50 so we know we're definitely failing. Hopefully these are not your marks by the end of the semester. So compile that, and I'm going to see false, and then I'm going to see you failed. All right, so I compiled that. We'll just run that really quick. And am I passing false? And so it says you failed. All right, so there's two different ways to call that method. But typically you don't call it to see the word true or false. You send it right into a if statement. All right, so going back to our question, write a method that receives a mark. Write a code that would call this method in a console application. All right, so we've done that as two separate things here. So let me just move this over a little bit so I can see my screenshot area, and I'll call my code up here. And let's just first take a copy of this little tiny method here. Control Shift 4. So there's my shot. And so I'm just going to put that in here. Okay, and so as far as writing the code goes, I guess we can put both examples in there. Okay, so we can put all of this in here if we want to, just to sort of show you the different ways that we can call this. All right, so now I've got to find that one. There it is there. Just going to keep erasing these as I make them. All right, we're almost there, guys. Write a method that receives your first name as student ID and returns your user ID. Okay, so this is going to be a string that's going to basically peel off the first 4 of your first name and the last 3 of your student ID, and then give you back a user ID. Okay, and we're going to assume everybody ends with a 0 on their user ID, just to keep it simple. All right, so very last example here. So I'm going to just push everything else down, and I'm going to have public static string. We're going to call this get ID. All right, we're going to send in string nm for name and string US for user. Okay, so we're taking 2 strings in and we're sending a string back out. Okay, so I'm going to have another variable here called user ID. Okay, and it's going to take the first 4 letters of name. So we learned how to do this in the string lesson. So nm.substring 0, 4. Okay, so then we've got the first 4 of the name. So then we're going to say this, user ID plus equals, so we're going to add on to it the last 3 of the user, I guess the user ID number, the user number. So that's going to be us.substring. Okay, so we're going to go to the n subtract 3. Okay, so us.length minus 3. So that's going to give me the last 3 of the user number. Okay, the student ID number. This should probably be called ID, but doesn't matter. All right, so now we have the we've got the first 4, the last 3, and then we just got to add on to that a 0 at the end. Okay, and then we're going to return the user ID. Okay, just like that. All right, now let's make this one a little bit interactive. Okay, so we're going to ask the person for their name and their student number and then print their user ID. All right, so down here I'm going to have string name, and we'll call this stid for student ID. All right, I'm going to go c.print enter your first name, and we're just gonna assume that everybody's name's got at least 4 characters, just to keep it simple. Okay, and then we're gonna say name equals c dot read line. By the way, that's how you read in a string from a console. Then we're gonna go c dot print, enter your student ID. Okay, and then stid equals c dot read line. Okay, and then we're just going to go c dot print line your login ID is, and now we're just going to make a call right here in the print statement to get ID. We're going to provide the name and the student ID. Okay, and that should work. All right, so name and student ID get sent in and received by these parameters nm and us. I don't know why I called it that. So then we take the first 4 of the first thing that we got, the last 3 of the second thing we got, we add a 0 and send it right back again to this print statement. Okay, now we could store that into a variable as well if we wanted to, but I'm just going to print it straight to the console. All right, so when I run this, I'm going to get a little bit of output from the last example first, but let's just make sure this works first before we call it a day or a video. All right, so my first name is going to be, we'll say Jacob, and my student ID is just a bunch of numbers here, and your login ID is Jaco4340. All right, so that worked pretty good. Okay, so let's put that in as our final example here. So that's for question number 9. Okay, and then for question number 10, let me just delete this. That would be the code we wrote in the main method. Okay, so that would just be this code right here. Okay, so that's how we successfully called it. Alright guys, that was a bit of a longer video, apologies, but that ends the non-void section. So now we're going to go on to the next section in the next video, so I will see you back for that shortly.